Hey there, Alley Cats! Today's video is going to be slightly more serious than normal because today I want to talk about some changes that I feel are desperately needed on Hypixel to greatly improve the server. Because lately it feels like the overall quality has been on a bit of a decline. This may be partially due to Minecraft as a whole decreasing in popularity, especially with the PvP community, so that's not exactly something that can be helped, but there are also many aspects of the server that have been lacking in recent years. Remember, this is just based on my opinion and many other players as well, so if you disagree, that is completely fine, and I will do my best to present this as constructive feedback rather than just mindless complaining, but I make no promises. We'll start off light and a little more positive, so the first change that I believe needs to be made to Hypixel is focusing more on community events. They were doing a little better with occasional tournaments, but even then there's been some issues with those, but I'm talking more about like karaoke and other things like that, because karaoke used to be advertised a lot more, but now years later I was actually surprised to learn it's still going on because it's just something you never hear about anymore unless you're already part of that small group of people. There needs to be more done for the players to bring them together as a community, because there's so much negativity around the network that's constantly building more and more. And I get it, it's a competitive server, but it's gotten so damn competitive and everyone's so obsessed about digital points in a Minecraft game. Having more opportunities to bring people together and hang out with others and just chill, it would benefit the player base quite a bit. Another change that I feel needs to be made that's relatively minor is the response given to ban appeals. There's definitely a lot of misconceptions about the appeals team, people thinking they're bots or they just deny every appeal, which no, none of that is true. However, they do post copy-pasted responses to appeals, which I understand is completely necessary, since a lot of people don't know that the appeals team can receive around 1,000 appeals every day. So even if they spend just 3 minutes writing out a custom response for each appeal, well, I'll let you do the math, but basically there wouldn't even be enough time in the day to make this possible. So I'm not criticizing the fact that staff use copy-pasted messages for appeals, but rather the message itself. Even when I was on the staff team myself, I always felt like the responses seemed a bit too robotic and didn't include as much information as they could have, since after all, once appeals get a response, they're immediately locked. So it seems only fair that the person get as much information as they possibly can. To my knowledge, there are 3 pre-written replies, one for appeals that are accepted, one for appeals that are denied, and one for denied watchdog appeals. And for the purposes of this video, we'll be discussing the watchdog response. For those who haven't read it before, this particular reply states as follows. Thank you for taking the time to make a punishment appeal, but unfortunately, your appeal has been denied. You were detected of cheating whilst playing on the Hypixel server. This was confirmed by automated administrative means. Although you may not have been directly hacking, you were caught using modifications that are not allowed on the server. These modifications may include auto-clickers, which could be enabled by software using Minecraft or external applications, or hardware, macro buttons on your mouse or keyboard. For your reference, I have included a link to our server rules along with a link to our guide on watchdog bans. Now, this message, in my opinion, more often than not, just creates more problems than it solves. For one, it definitely sounds like it was written by a computer, so it's understandable why many people think appeals are answered by bots. There's no sense of personality or like there's an actual human being answering, but on top of that, the wording itself can be very confusing and misleading to players, especially where it mentions modifications used may include autoclicker. This causes a lot of people to misunderstand what's being said, and they believe the staff member is saying that they were specifically banned for use of autoclickers, which many times isn't the case. So then, of course, they assume that the staff have falsely banned them and that they are incompetent and bad at their job, further damaging the staff team's already somewhat fragile reputation. Personally, if it was up to me, I would have 3 different copy-paste messages to use for watchdog appeals. One for an accepted appeal, one for a denial on an appeal where they admit to cheating, and another for a denial where they claim to be innocent in their appeal. The accepted message could just be the same one they use now, I guess. That one isn't super important. And for the denial where they claim innocence, I would say something along the lines of, "Hello, thank you for taking the time to post a ban appeal. We have reviewed the evidence we have on file regarding your punishment, and I'm sorry to say that unfortunately, we are going to have to deny your appeal as we've confirmed your account was used to cheat on the server. If you have any mods installed, please look over our list of allowed modifications, and keep in mind any mods not on that list are used at your own risk and may result in a ban. Or if you are certain you do not have any disallowed modifications, then your account may be compromised, so we recommend you change your account password and make any necessary changes before your ban expires and you return to the server." For your reference, I'll include a link to our list of allowed modifications and our guide on Watchdog. It's not perfect, but I mean, it's simple, it's friendly, and informative without sounding so robotic. It sounds much better than the current response that goes out to all Watchdog appeals, no matter what the players say, which just makes them more frustrated. And it would only need some minor changes for a permanent ban that could also be its own copy-pasted response to save time, but it'll provide multiple explanations to players for their bans that they might not have known. The current response just causes a lot of frustration and misconceptions about the whole appealing process, so I think it really needs to be changed. The next change that I feel really needs to be made is giving more attention and care to the forums. I posted a video just a couple weeks ago showcasing some of the latest cringy threads I could find on the forums, and the video itself was more on the lighthearted side, but it shows a glimpse of a more serious and persisting problem. I mentioned in the video that the forums have become sort of a dumping ground for all kinds of trolls, toxic users, the lowest of the low in terms of content. There's barely any sort of intelligent discussions or halfway decent suggestions, and overall it's just very disorganized and unpleasant, and it's caused quite a lot of people to abandon the forums altogether. There's no official forum rules, which users have been begging for a long time now to clarify things such as necro posting and farming ratings, things like that, which aren't directly stated anywhere, but people still get punished for it. So there's a lot of confusion when people get warned or even banned for something they weren't aware was against the rules because it's not listed anywhere. This is important information, so I have no idea why this hasn't been added yet. It's supposedly been in progress for at least a year at this point, but still nothing. And also, staff are very hesitant when it comes to dealing with people who are very clearly pushing their boundaries. Trolls who are always posting nonsense, and toxic users who demean and are so rude to others on a daily basis, but these people are rarely ever banned right away without doing something outrageous. At most, they might have their post removed and maybe get a warning that expires after a short time, so the punishments are very light and also rather inconsistent. And I don't know if there's just a lack of guidelines for the team or some other reason. Based on what I know about the team, that could very well be the case, so maybe even for them, there is no clear definition of this behavior is punishable and this isn't. And because of this, they tend to err on the side of caution, even if someone is causing trouble all over the forums and irritating everyone they come across and creating all sorts of unnecessary drama. You know, people who know they're pushing boundaries and know they can get away with it, so they do the absolute most they can do without any consequences. In addition to this, reports have been consistently neglected as well, which I mentioned in my first video about why I don't ever want to rejoin the staff team. At the time of recording that video, there were dozens of pages of unanswered reports of in-game hackers and all sorts of other offenses, so with 20 reports per page, there were well over 1,000 reports that had been sitting there for weeks. Same with item reports whenever someone reports a post on the forums. Those had been just as neglected, so it could sometimes take a month or two for a report to be dealt with. And it wasn't because of any excessive volume of reports that they haven't seen before, there just hasn't been enough attention put on the forums and reports. The management tried to come up with a quick solution, but it was more or less like putting a band-aid over a bullet wound, and now I've noticed that reports I made are once again taking weeks to be resolved. I'm not trying to say this to hate on the staff team. Again, I know there are a lot of them who work really hard, but it's clearly not enough. And the forums are a very important part of the network, so it needs more attention than it's currently getting. It needs proper rules specifically for the forums, and they need a larger team focusing on it regularly. Obviously, the solutions they've tried before haven't really worked, so I feel like it would benefit them to greatly expand the team as a whole, and that's a point I'll talk more about a bit later, but more people regularly checking on the forums, going through reports, and having some more solid guidelines would overall make the website better and more enjoyable and could potentially prevent frustrated users from leaving due to just being fed up with the current state of the forums. That was probably more in-depth than it needed to be, but moving on! The next big change that I feel needs to be made is something that I've had to deal with more personally because of the games I play on the server, so I understand a lot of people might not be able to relate or even understand what I'm talking about, but bear with me here. What it essentially boils down to is the need to enforce rules better and more consistently, which is sort of a blanket statement. Obviously, I've talked about before in previous videos about issues with organization and consistency with players getting different punishments for the same offenses, so this may be sort of a vague point, but the specific example I want to give is with Guess the Build. That is right, Guess the Build. If you're more into PvP style games, you've likely never played this, maybe never even heard of it, but it's in the build battle lobby with the other more casual building games, and it's actually pretty fun. Or at least it was. See, the problem with this game over time is it has been overrun by groups of people teaming and boosting in the game. Now, normally in most other games, especially the super popular PvP games like Bed Wars and Sky Wars, something like this would be grounds for a ban. But unfortunately, it seems like for some reason the same rules aren't enforced in other games, even though it ruins them just as much. Basically, what happens in Guess the Build is player A and player B get into a party or in a Discord call, and as soon as player A starts their turn, they tell player B what the theme is so they can guess it before player A even begins building. And then they'll do the same for player B's turn, ensuring they get the most amount of points possible, and it usually guarantees a win. Now, I've spoken with multiple staff members who have talked to the managers and trying to make this officially against the rules. But the managers always give excuses like, oh, we don't know for sure if they're teaming, it could just be a coincidence. Which that in itself is just... it makes no sense. You're saying it's possible that two players who don't know each other, but they just happen to guess each other's builds immediately before either of them even places a single block. Like, the chances of that actually happening with two strangers who didn't plan this out is just simply impossible. It would be just as likely that two people are exchanging items in a solo Bed Wars game, but they're not teaming. One of them could have just been innocently clearing out their inventory, and the other person just happens to coincidentally pick them up a moment later and somehow forgot to attack the other person. It's a pretty bogus excuse, and I understand wanting to avoid the possibility of potentially falsely banning someone, but it's just not possible in this scenario. And that's just one example of many inconsistent rules and gives the impression that because it's not a PvP game or one of the more popular games on the server, it just doesn't matter. Let it be overtaken by teamers who give themselves an unfair advantage every single game. I'm not saying this is the attitude they have towards these games, but it certainly feels like it sometimes. It's so frustrating for those who play these games, and it's something that needs to be addressed very soon. If rules are going to be posted, then they need to apply to all games. Kind of in the same category as inconsistent punishments is bluffing about certain rules. Now, what I mean by that is that staff will say to the public that something is bannable, but in their own guidelines, they won't actually follow through with punishments or do much to prevent it. And the most notable example of that I have seen is ban evading. If staff bans someone, then ideally they wouldn't allow that person to come back, since that's the whole point of a punishment. And yeah, ban evading is supposed to result in another ban, but unfortunately that isn't really the case. Now, I understand that catching those who do ban evade can be rather tricky. I get it. You can't catch everyone. Back in the day when I was staff, if we were suspecting someone of ban evading, we would need the developers to do an IP check and we would ban the account, which they don't do anymore, but they do have an automated system that works, I believe, by banning any new accounts that log in with the same IP as a banned account. But the problem is with these accounts is that their ban reason is stated as account security alert. This is the exact same ban for a compromised account. So then all someone has to do is go to the appeal team and claim they've changed their password, which you don't even need to provide proof you've done so, since Mojang has stated that servers can't require people to show their account info screens, and then they're immediately unbanned. This isn't even secret staff knowledge or leaking information. It's been discussed on the forums before by people who were smart enough to put 2 and 2 together. Another instance of this is that staff publicly say that they punish anyone in private chats on the server who say anything serious like death threats, verbal abuse, things like that, when I know for a fact that they do not, and they haven't for almost 2 years now. Yes, I'm aware this is information I technically shouldn't know, but there were a lot of staff members who disagreed with this new policy, and the managers stated, and I quote, "Players need to control who they allow on their friends list and who they allow into parties. We need to teach them to be safer online." And I'm not trying to shit on the managers. I'm sure they have good intentions with this, but trying to teach players about online stranger danger by not punishing for anything in private chats is the absolute wrong way to go about it. And I know it's not something they really want to announce in public that they don't punish for these things. That would just cause all sorts of problems. But then lying to the players about it and saying it is bannable is even worse. Not only does this make the community not take the staff team very seriously when they don't follow through on their threats to punish players, but it makes the staff seem less trustworthy. And again, this is not to hate on the staff. I'm not trying to attack them. This is just fair, valid, constructive criticism that has been discussed many times among players. And the last change that I feel really needs to be made urgently, and this is the biggest one, is there is a desperate need for a change in management. You guys know my history with the staff managers by now, and I've gone into more detail about this in previous videos, so I'll keep this short and simple and avoid specific details so as not to upset anyone. But basically, there's still a lot of persisting issues that are negatively affecting the staff team and making many of them unhappy, and it's only been getting worse. And again, I'm sure the managers mean well and they want to do a good job, and in their eyes, they're probably doing perfectly fine. But some people just aren't fit to be in a position of authority like this, being in charge of so many people, and that's okay. It's nothing personal, but I think at this point it's absolutely necessary to find others who are more qualified and more suited for a position like this to make better decisions, which would benefit the team and by extension the server as a whole. Then they could further expand the volunteer staff team and make things more efficient around the server, which lately they've really been struggling to do because staff members are either being demoted or they resign quicker than they can bring in new members. And again, it's nothing personal. I am not saying this because I have some grudge against the managers for whatever reason, because I know I'm gonna get those comments like, "Ugh, you're just salty because you got demoted. Stop hating on the staff." But this is something that's been discussed endlessly within the community and even with many staff members, and it's just something we believe has been very, very long overdue. And those are 6 changes I could come up with that I feel are needed on Hypixel. I'm sure there's plenty of things you guys would like to see as well, so let me know in the comments down below, but please try to be constructive about it and not just outright spewing hate. Maybe I'll make another video eventually about some of the best ones, who knows? So thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you have not already. If you'd like to help support me and my channel, you can check out the link to my Patreon in the video description and check out the awesome rewards you get by contributing, including full access to my Discord, which you can join with limited access right now. There's also a link to that in the video description as well. I think that's everything. This end of the video spiel keeps getting longer and longer. So thank you guys again, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye!